Hey, hello. This is the behavior management makeup training, and we will go over everything behavioral for any situation you may come across and how best to deal with it. But again, realize that you do have the resources of other counselors, other people that may have been in similar situations in the past, and just in the moment, you will probably feel what you think is right, and that is probably going to align with what this training is telling you. But we are going to go over the basics, and it really just boils down to the basic theme of understanding that one's behavior may be stemming from something else completely different. And listening to them and asking questions to try to understand where they're coming from is essential and crucial to trying to de escalate any situation you may come across. And so, starting off this workshop, um, so if you were here in person, what we did was we handed out papers and pens and we had people write down 2 times in their lives. Um, if you're camp age, then go for that. But if it's relatively recently or whatever, that's totally fine. But that they did something really great, so really positive behavior, or they did something really bad, really negative behavior. Um, I give you like 10 seconds to like try to think about something. Um, so the thing is though to realize that uh, one of the incidents that you wrote down changed how you thought about yourself, and one of the incidents also probably changed how others thought about you. And regardless of whether the incidents were good or bad, it also involved another person. And um, going along those points, it's important to note that almost all behavior, whether it is good or bad, is a social thing. So it does involve another person interacting with you. Its context is social and it has social consequences. Again, whether that is good or bad. And so this is definitely something to take account of for children, which is our next point is. So we are not our behavior. There's no such thing as bad kids, just kids making bad decisions. And so, I mean, yes, it is just a semantic difference, but it is a very important thing to delineate a person's actions from who they actually are as a person. Because again, we do all make mistakes, even us as adults. So there is definitely that thing to justify everything. So we learn from our mistakes, and these kids are testing limits and boundaries, and they're just really trying to understand the social world and how they themselves fit into it. They're really trying to figure out who they are as people at this point in their lives. So it's really important that we try to understand where they're coming from when they do act out, or if they do any behavior that um, just doesn't seem up to par with what we're expecting from them. And again, this that leads into our next point, that campers' behavior is about them learning. And though it may seem personal, it really, really isn't. Campers' behavior is not about the adults. Again, it is about them interacting with their social environment, their environment in general, and just how they're stimulated, and them trying to figure out how they fit in. Given all of this, our best strategy for working with a group of campers is to be clear and consistent. And so we should know the expectations and the consequences, as well as letting our campers know the expectations and consequences, and making it very approachable yet very definitive when we first present it to them, so that they do know that there are boundaries, and if they are crossed, that there will be some type of repercussions, yet this is still a place for them to have fun, and for them, for a place, an environment for them to express who they are and still try to figure themselves out, and that it's okay if they do make these mistakes, and that we are totally there to support them through it, and we're ultimately there to just help them work through their behaviors. And so, given those ideas, the rest of this will explore helping campers develop positive behavior and working with negative behavior. Okay. Um, so if you can think of like two top techniques for developing positive behavior, think of those. But while we are doing that, we are going to watch this YouTube video.
This is an awareness test.
I don't know if you can see this whole thing.
How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a cyclist thing, but again, it does point out um, something very valuable that we're going to add to. So it's awesome that you're trying to be alert and that you're trying to keep your campers engaged and having fun and all these things, but you may become preoccupied with looking for things that they may be doing wrong, any type of negative behaviors, and what type of repercussions you'll have to just have to enforce. But it's really, really, really important to look for positive behavior in our campers. And that video shows that if we're only looking for certain things, we may miss those positive behaviors that they may be exhibiting. And acknowledging the positive behaviors is so much more influential than uh, teaching that than acknowledging the negative behaviors that they have. And so, yes, we do have to acknowledge negative behaviors when they do happen, but we should also really reinforce the positive behaviors that they naturally exhibit and uh, encourage them to continue their natural ways and tendencies of acting, because these kids are just so amazing that they will have these amazing positive characteristics that they just um, inherently have. And so, with that video, it's definitely important to acknowledge this positive behavior. And so, teach yourself, these are some ways to look for positive behavior. So, when you're working with your campers, ask yourself, what am I looking for? What do I want to see happen right now? The answers to these questions tend to be positive behavior that is sometimes happening without much recognition. And so, when you see positive behavior, what do you do? One of the biggest things to do for these campers is to praise it. And that may sound so simple, but to make praise very, very impactful, there's 3 steps that you should do that are really, really simple, but they're very effective. And it sort of goes under the radar for like how impactful it can be. So there's 3 steps. So 1, be specific. 2, be timely. And 3, focus on the process rather than the product. And so here are some examples of how to be specific and timely and to focus on the process rather than the product, and why. And so when you're being specific, it eliminates the confusion of what the camper thinks you're talking about. So definitely try to say, instead of saying like, great job, Rue, just say like, be very specific about their action, like, great job on helping him tie his shoe, Rue. And then timely praise, so that means do it in a short amount of time of that action actually happening rather than waiting a couple days. Do it within like the next 5-10 minutes or immediately after the act has happened. So rather than waiting for being like, hey Ruth, thanks for helping Joe tie his shoes yesterday, you can say like, oh hey Rue, I really appreciate you tying Joe's shoes right after they have finished and you're still walking to the cabin. um, and then focus on the process, not the product. And so this really means to focus your praise on their effort rather than the product that happened. And because you want to focus on the skills that they had to use to receive that praise rather than what actually happens, because it's essentially the skills that they will take with them throughout the rest of their life rather than just that one part of them, like that one instance, that one product in that moment. So, yes, you could say, like, thanks, Rue. I appreciate you so much for helping Joe tie his shoes. It'll definitely help him in the future, blah, blah, blah. Like, obviously, like, helping tie his shoes was great, but it's really the generosity, the kindness, um, her taking her time out of her day to help him get up and tie his shoes. Obviously, like, it'll be very different with each instance, but um, definitely cool. So, working with negative behavior, we are going to talk about 3 basic steps to working with campers with negative behavior. And so, again, there's 3 things. So, dealing with the present moment, working through the consequences to their behavior, and follow up and support for better choices. And again, this is sort of like the timeliness thing where, like, if you're dealing with it in the present moment, it addresses the fact that it had just happened and it's not going to go unnoticed. And so you don't want to wait like a couple days and be like, hey, I really didn't appreciate when you did that 2 days ago, because they're going to be like, what happened? It's fine. Obviously, it didn't matter that much because it's been a couple days. So might as well nip it in the bud so that it doesn't happen again. And it gives them more time to work on their behavior, and it gives them more time for you to support them throughout their behavior change. So ask yourself, what are the best ways to handle it in the moment when campers are making bad choices? Um, so there are a couple of things you can do. It sort of depends on what age group you do have, but these are a couple of things that you can do with all three, or I mean, these 3 things are a couple of things you can do with all ages. Obviously, it will look a little different, and you may approach the situation a little differently with your verbiage, but that is totally okay because there are really instances when you can use all of these. So the first one would be planned ignoring. So some campers are disruptive, annoying because they're using that to get attention. And so if you ignore it and give it more attention, and you give more attention to the kids that are behaving positively, then it'll usually nip it in the bud, and those campers that are distracting and being disruptive will follow suit with the positive behavior that is being exhibited and that you're giving attention to. Another way is redirection. And so sometimes kids just need more focused effort in making sure that they are engaged. So if they are being disruptive, it may be because they're not being stimulated by an activity in a certain way, or maybe, say, you're doing arts and crafts, so you're making monsters with pipe cleaners, but they don't necessarily want to make monsters, but they want to make cool robots. Totally okay to just redirect their attention. Still, they're doing arts and crafts, but hey, you're just making a different type of thing. Totally okay as long as they're having a great camp um, and they are enjoying their time, and you are just redirecting their energy in a different direction. Totally fine. Um, Calm acknowledgement is the last way, and so this is when you just ask them in a calm and respectful tone to stop what they're doing and to do something else. And usually, if you're very respectful about it, they will listen. And if you don't, then there are also other ways for you to just do it. And we will go through those behaviors as well. So, working through consequences of their behavior. This is an important part to address their behavior, and then this is essential to behavior change. So we want to make it a negative into a positive. And so almost all conversations with campers about their behavior should follow a pretty regular cycle. And so 1 would be asking a lot of questions, 2 would be defining choices, and 3 would be trying and testing out those choices. And so when you're asking questions, you want to figure out what really happened. And so ask questions, but just be okay with those answers, because you can't really assume that you know what happened, and specifically from the camper's perspective. And so, what are the needs of the other person or people, and what did they want out of this? So, really try to find why the camper did what they did and what it all boils down to. What do they really want out of the whole situation? Because say um, they may be acting out and lashing out and throwing cards, but it may be because they weren't able to play the game initially. So, and they just felt like they weren't being included. So it could boil down to something so simple. And so asking questions is a way to get down to how they're really feeling about the whole situation and what could have possibly caused it and what their negative behavior is stemming from. And just because someone told you first does not mean that that only means that they got to you first and that not necessarily they were the one that didn't cause it or didn't play a role in it. And so this is really why you should start asking questions. So, what's really going on here? Why are they having this issue? What skill set is underdeveloped? And so we have various campers of various ages, and obviously, depending on their age, they will have underdeveloped skills socially, and that could look differently in every age, and it could be a different type of behavior. But either way, it really is stemming from some underdeveloped skill where they just don't know how to express themselves in a way that communicates what they actually want in a positive way, or they just um, they just really lack the skills to say how they really feel. And so all young people have underdeveloped skills in these areas, so decision making, hypothetical thinking, self expression, emotion regulation, social interaction, and social understanding. And so for decision making, again, like if you have underdeveloped skills, you may not think your actions through thoroughly. So that's when you just lash out immediately after something bad happens rather than being like, hey, let me take a step back and think of like why I shouldn't do that. And then hypothetical thinking, again, decision making and hypothetical thinking can go together. Whereas, like, you don't really think of all the possible outcomes that could happen if I do act out. What if I actually did do that? Well, then I could get in trouble. I could go to timeout. I could lose my juice privileges, things like that. Self expression, again, if this is underdeveloped, like it could look as like an outburst, it could look as them being taciturn and not wanting to like participate in anything because they really don't know how to express that, like maybe this isn't their favorite activity, or maybe they're homesick, or they want to just talk to someone but they're just receding, or they could be being mean to other campers or something along those lines. They just really don't know how to get the emotions out that they're feeling, and they're just acting out in a different way. Again, emotion regulation, this goes as well with self expression, or even it goes along with everything else that we talked about as well. They all really go hand in hand. If you have really bad emotional regulation, then you can just blow up. And um, again, they don't really think through what happens if you do erupt. And then again, social interactions and social understanding, they may not know how to read social cues as well as we do because we've been around them for a while and we've seen um, nuances that they may not have seen thus far. And that's totally okay because at camp, they're there to learn, they're there to interact with others, make friends, and again, learn the nuances of friendship and how to be a good peer to others. So, those are some ways that those skill sets could be seen if they are underdeveloped. And so, when you are dealing with negative behavior, defining choices is essential. So, what can they do about it? When you help explore what they can do about it, it gives them the autonomy over their own behavior, which makes them more likely to adhere to it and to remember the lessons that they learned and apply it to their lives outside of camp when we're not there to be that support for them. And they have to remember what we had supported them through when they were in the camp setting. And this is a way for them to really, really grow as people. And that's essentially what we're here to do. We're here to help them develop into the young, great, amazing adults that we know that they will become. And so, all campers, so this is one of the hardest steps for behavior management. So, all campers will seek to displace responsibility for their actions. And so, by defining choices, we are holding them accountable for it, but also giving them, again, that autonomy so that they can have control over their own um, destiny, per se, their behavior destiny. Uh, so ask the following questions to keep the camper on target for defining their own choices. And so, what can you do to make the situation better? What did you do when XYZ happened? How did you respond? And when this happened, what happened next? And so this keeps the camper focused on their behavior in the situation and the consequences of that behavior. So again, this part of the conversation should be focused on teaching the limitation described above. What couldn't they do that they should have done? Um, what can they do to involve the other person or people? And how could this problem be solved together? And so, again, this is just a really efficient and effective way to make an impact so that we can hopefully change this negative behavior into a positive one and to prevent the situation from happening again in the future. And so once the camper finds their own choice that they want to go along with, so say they this camper got in a fight with someone because they weren't allowed to play cards, and so when you pull them aside, um, you help them define their choices, and they're like, well, I could apologize to this camper, and then maybe next time I could calmly ask them if I could join, and if they say no, then I could ask to join the next game. Um, and then they could test that choice again. So if we do play cards when we're just hanging out in the cabin, we can try it out. And so when you're testing those choices, make sure to ask yourself and to ask the camper, like, hey, did it work? And if not, there are other choices that may work. And if it doesn't work, maybe you just have to redefine the problem again and go back to maybe the problem just wasn't clear and maybe it was stemming from something else. And so we're actually going to switch to a different page really fast, but it's really, really important that once you do define these choices and you try testing one of these choices, to follow up with the campers right after, or at least like um, sometime later in the week. But obviously, again, you want it in a timely manner and not like a couple days later, because then again, they'll just be like, well, I don't remember, or just things like that. It just won't resonate with them as long. So definitely follow up and make sure that they know that you're supporting them through it and that you really genuinely care that you want this positive behavior to be incorporated in their lives. And so um, it really can change one's behavior if they feel like someone is watching them and caring for them and that they're genuinely invested in them, and it's a great way to form a connection with your campers. And so, the camp custom behavior management strategy, this is what we sort of went over, but there are 6 things. So, understanding behavior and choices, 2, helping kids develop positive behavior, 3, staff communication and teamwork, clarity and consistency, 4, new philosophy on negative behavior, so the roles, responsibility, and role modeling, 5, logical consequences versus punishment, and 6, we'll go over some age-based discipline strategies. And so this is something that I had touched on already before, but I'm just going to reiterate it, that there is a reason for their behavior, and it's really essential that we try to understand why they are using this challenging behavior to express themselves that way. And so, why did they do what they do? We all make choices that directly affect how we relate and connect to those around us. Um, so, sometimes we do it for attention, sometimes we're just really, it ultimately just boils down to that we're just trying to connect and relate, even though we don't really know how or have the skill sets to do it in a way that is positive and um, that is just positive. I'm losing words. I can't think of words. uh, but just also know that, so since chasm is very diverse, like uh, there may be various expressions of similar things in different kids, and that's totally okay. Um, but whether they are boys, girls, older, younger, social loners, typical or atypical, they all understand that what they do directly affects their relationship with others. And since most kids follow a pattern regarding their behavior, we can break this cycle down and prevent some negative behavior from happening and intervene when it does. And so, what kids really, really want, and what everyone really wants, again, boils down to this connection and relating to others. So, step one, am I cool? It happens all the time. So, kids, adults, teens, professionals um, enter this social landscape where they just want to belong. And so, it could sort of boil down to the phrase that, am I cool? Um, how do I fit in? That's not really how most adults would say it, as this handout says, but creating community and a sense of belonging and developing a network can really prevent these negative behaviors from happening. So, knowing your campers, helping the old campers and the returning campers, um, bring the new campers in and make them comfortable and include them in things could really alleviate any hard situations you may come across. Because once you create a sense of inclusion, that's really where some of these problems stem from, being excluded, feeling like they don't belong, feeling less than. Because Kesem is a place where we are family and we are all worthy, our stories are worthy. Everyone should feel validated in their emotions and feelings at camp, and this is their safe place to be who they are and to be valued and empowered by who they are. And so, really making sure that we can create an environment where they feel that way is essential. So, opening day, make sure all the campers feel welcomed, not only by you, but by all the other counselors and campers alike. So, definitely good. And let's see. So, adults, it's powerful and ultimately necessary to identify with the issues and challenges that campers have if we help guide their behavior, because when we empathize with them, they feel like they're being heard. And again, we're validating their feelings that they're allowed to feel this way and that it's okay for them to have made these mistakes. So, again, when we actively listen to what they're saying and really respond to a way that shows that we care and shows that we are hearing what they're telling us, these campers are way more likely to abide by like what types of choices and things we do define for them, to interact more positively with their social environment and to feel like they do belong and that they fit in more, or whatever they are feeling in that moment. Step two, freak out. Insecurity is an emotion that everyone shares. We're all insecure about something. Some things that campers are typically insecure about, we know, like their perceived ability at an activity, their clothes, whether they will have friends, their body, and their family. Other things we would really have no idea about unless they tell us. So, like what they did during the school year, how their parents' marriage is doing, thing, an immediate or recent death in the family, just anything like that. And all still others know nothing about it really. The point is that we all have insecurities, and these insecurities can drive us to action. And sometimes it can be a mild insecurity, or it can be a more significant insecurity. But regardless, these insecurities do motivate and necessitate action, choices, or behavior, whether that is positive or negative. Um, and so, action, coping strategies, and skills are simply the way we deal with our own little freakouts. And sometimes we talk, ask questions, and engage. Other times we withdraw and stick to ourselves. And so, sometimes our coping strategies are normal and healthy, like when campers try to engage other kids in activities. Um, Other times it can be like pretty awkward, off putting, violent, or socially clumsy. And so, again, this could be a direct result from feeling insecure, unconnected, quote unquote, not that cool. And the trick to really understanding kids and their behavior is knowing that there is a reason behind what they're doing, and their actions may not be healthy or typical, but there's some reason or rationale behind it. And so I sort of talked about this, the prevention and intervention. And so for guiding and encouraging positive behavior, there are three basic parts that we can manipulate. So we know kids struggle to connect, and we know kids will have insecurities, and we know that they will try to deal with those insecurities through their behavior, which could either connect them, distance them, or otherwise reconfigure the social map. And so Um, we as counselors, like, it is our duty to work hard at making sure that every camper feels safe and connected to the other campers around them, whether that's us introducing other campers to them, to each other, reminding returning campers that, like, hey, this is their new year, like, I would love, like, you are such a great role model for them, let's go, why don't you go show them how to put their bunk together, and just encouraging positive behavior from your campers as well, from your past campers that you knew. And so definitely getting, again, to know your campers is essential to being um, influential when trying to encourage positive behavior. And then, okay, let's see, again, you could work on creating a secret name or a mission for your group cabin or give them group responsibilities. So try to make it fun. You don't necessarily have to be like, hey, just do this. You could make it like a game, like, oh, every time you do that, you get 1 star, and then you get 5 stars, you get 2 juices one day. Sorry, all my examples probably sound very youngish, but that's because I work with young kids. So obviously, if with you're like with teens or something, it may look very different. But totally be creative. Camp is a place for not only your campers to be creative, but for you to be creative. You are also a child at heart, and this is a great place to just really let it all out, but responsibly. So, huh. Okay, the freak out. In the words of the former U.S. Secretary of Defense, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are things we know we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. Brilliant. Wow, that was a mouthful, am I right? So, this basically points to that, like, we do know some insecurities that these campers have, but we also don't really know some other insecurities uh, because they may not be telling us. And so, we are going into camp knowing that they will feel insecure about having friends, being in a new environment, having a new routine, whether or not they're good at activities and whatever. And so this may be the stem of like why they do certain behaviors. And so we just have to respect that they are that this behavior is coming from someone else or something else. Um, so we really need to pay attention to process and the procedure. And so think about what it's like for the kids in just a few hours and really empathize with like how overwhelming camp may be if they are new or if they're not with their friends that year or just anything that is changing for them because again, this is a very stimulating environment and sometimes kids don't respond as well as you think they would to this. So that is totally okay. Um, if we can just pay close attention to the expectations of the camp processes and procedures, we can minimize some of the effects of these insecurities. And so you can totally validate their feelings that it's okay to be overwhelmed with camp. Like, even I'm a little overwhelmed, and like, especially for new counselors, like, maybe you're feeling a little overwhelmed and a little scared that you can't relate to your campers, but letting them know that it's a new experience for you too could really be comforting to them and knowing that they aren't alone. And so you could alleviate some of these worries and anxieties by giving them a daily schedule, giving them ample time for transition. So, giving them like a heads up, like, hey, in 10 minutes, we're going to be doing this. Giving them more control over an environment that seems like they don't really have control in because it is so new to them. And then really encouraging teamwork rather than competitive things. So, a lot of kids, some of them really don't like competitions, and that's okay. Totally fine. Um, But really, just try to be intentional with the ways you interact with your campers because it can really help. It can really help with their positive behavior management and just making them feel really connected at camp. You're basically just trying to build an environment and build trust with them and create more meaningful relationships, not only between um, campers themselves, but with you as well and other staff members. Because again, Camp Kesem is a family, and in order to do that, and one of the foundational things that we do at camp is build the support system with a foundation of trust and the fact that they can confide in us and that they can be themselves around us. So, awesome things. and that they shouldn't be scared around us because we're here to just be there for them. And so the last part, action. The first part of using action or coping skills to help guide campers' behavior is actually not about the campers at all. It's about us. When we are trying to prevent insecurities and fears from developing into unhealthy coping strategies or intervene when we see really negative or maladaptive behavior, the first step is for adults to see the behavior, and the behavior is really just a coping strategy. Um, Recognizing this is sort of hard to do when it could be like a very bad outburst, but just recognizing that it is some type of cry for, I just want connection, I want this, I am doing this for another reason other than what it seems like. That is a great place for us to start as counselors. So first, teach to the underdeveloped skill. So really try to figure out what skill you think is underdeveloped, and then try to create a way for them to develop that skill throughout camp, throughout the week, and that, again, check in with them on that. Another way to prevent and intervene is to be specific and process oriented praise. And so, I remember that when they are exploring these defined choices that you went through with them before, and you see that they're doing something well after having exhibited that negative behavior prior and they had changed it and they did something great, praise them for it. Be timely, be specific, be focused on the process and how that changed and how it created that new perfect end product. Honestly, don't focus on the product, but again, on the process. Um, and then, let's see. So ask yourself, did you try something new? Did she keep trying over and over? Did he or she have fun doing it? So um, it really helps pinpoint the process and where we need to praise. Perfect. And then definitely when you are offering choices, just at camp, it is important to just know that you may have to be very flexible with plans and activities and redirecting energy and focus, and that is totally okay because whatever you need to do to help campers feel more in control of their behavior, go ahead and do it. Okay, so strategies and framework. We went over all of this basically. So, helping kids develop positive behavior. So, definitely provide structure and balance it with a reasonable amount of freedom. Again, give them that autonomy, and then establish clear expectations right away. We definitely went through all of this, but make sure to praise and then to reinforce and encourage that behavior. Um, Tips and tricks, don't let campers get to you. We have gone over this. Cool. And then, so for 3, staff communication and teamwork, just again, try to be clear and consistent with your expectations, not only with your campers, but with the staff as well. And so, especially in your units, if you're having an issue with one camper repeatedly, or if you're having an overall cabin issue where there's just some things, it's definitely important that you and your co-counselors work together as a team to maintain some sense of balance and order and some clear and consistent expectations for your campers. And so, if it's the whole cabin doing it, like sit them down and talk as a cabin and just be like, hey guys, like we just need to talk about a behavior. What do you think we could improve? Why do you think we're having this conversation? Definitely just be open with them and be transparent with what you think is happening, and work together as a group. And sometimes throughout the week, honestly, you'll be like really, really tired, and maybe like you always handle the situation with one camper, like your co counselor can definitely take over. So um, try to maintain that uniform front of you and your co counselors in your unit so that you're all on the same page of how to deal with these behavioral misactions. I don't even know if that's a word, but cool. And then there's the new philosophy on negative behavior, so roles, responsibility, and role modeling. Again, your campers are looking up to you. You are one of their role models. You are the coolest person to them. So be the kind person you want your campers to be and obey the rules yourself. So this looks like including all the other counselors, not just the same two people, talking to all the other campers and including them in the game as well. Um, Staying off your cell phone, singing camp songs, just really exhibiting to them what you love about camp and showing them that they also can have that same type of fun and create those same connections that you um, are creating as well. And so treat all of your campers fairly. No one should get special privileges, and you should be just as nice and try to spend the same amount of time with each of your campers. I know it's very, very hard, and maybe you're great with dealing with one camper's meltdowns. It's totally okay, but definitely balance again off with your co-counselors because there may just be days when you are tired and that you just don't necessarily know how to handle the situation as best as you could the day before, but one of your co-counselors is a rock star that day, go ahead and switch off. That is fine. Again, get to know your campers and build relationships. The more you know about them, the more they will feel you're investing in them and want to listen. And then delineate the feeling between or the definition between logical consequences and punishment. And so consequences should always just make sense to the adults basically. So to you, campers and guardians. So not just the adults, but your campers as well. So um, no consequences should be developed out of annoyance, anger, or a lack of patience. So take your time to think things over with your counselor. So if there has to be some type of consequences because of a behavior, it's not just something random. It's something that will promote a positive behavior and will help them realize that maybe this past transgression that they had, like if they hadn't have done it, then it wouldn't have led to what they have to deal with now. And so consequences and reward should not include food or withholding any personal belongings from a camper. Try to make the consequences align with what they did wrong. For example, if a camper wasn't following the rules during swim time, next time they aren't allowed to go in for the first 10 minutes. And again, if you have any questions with any really, really bad behavior during camp, it's totally okay. Ask your unit leader for help. Ask your co-counselors if they don't know what to do. Then ask the directors, the admin team, the camp advisors. If it's something very, very severe and you think it may be stemming from something else where they may be hurting themselves, hurting others, um, just make sure to um, what's it called? Just make sure to like let the mental health professional know, and that is when you do reach up. You can definitely reach up to higher staff at any point, but like if you think that it's really endangering others or endangering um, themselves, that is definitely a time when you should reach out to the mental health professional and the directors and the camp advisor. One thing to note though, if you are experiencing a situation where there may be something that you think is very sensitive and that a camper discloses to you, or something severe is happening, you want to limit it to the amount of people that do know about it. So if you think it's very, very severe, just go directly to the directors and the admin team. Um, so go directly to the directors, go directly to the camp advisor. Um, totally okay, because only certain people need to know about certain things. And again, try to remember that camp is a place for fun and only certain people need to know about the very, very serious things where that need to be dealt with. And if you think the directors are appropriate or whatever, go to them and then they will help you deal with the situation. So, um, but again, if you do have any questions, like feel free to reach out to anyone you think is appropriate. And so here is the age discipline strategies handout. Things to think about. Kids are always testing boundaries and limits. Um, the way they learn is through testing these boundaries and limits. Um, and again, we've gone over all of these. So, really try to prepare for any difficult conversation. And the keys to a successful conversation are to calmly state the facts, to listen carefully, and to ask open ended questions. Um, so, here is a very, very outlined process of how to have a conversation where you could have like a very effective conversation for your camper. but you ultimately want this conversation to help the camper feel empowered and to motivate them to resolve the conflict by changing their own behavior. So, one, reflect calmly on what the problem is. Describe how your expectations do not match the camper's behavior. State at the start what you think about what happened, and then let the camper disclose the facts that they know in that their version of it. So, listen very carefully. So, use your active listening. Um, Reflect back what you heard to them to make sure that you're understanding them correctly and that they're expressing themselves clearly. Maybe they'll say something, but they meant something else. You don't really know, but definitely use active listening. Allow them their perspective and feelings. They're neither right nor wrong, but just validate that the situation happened and that they're allowed to have those feelings. Ask them about how their behavior affected others and ask whether or not that kind of stuff is okay. And then four, state your goal for the specific behavior change. Um, Ask the camper's perspective on that change in behavior and discuss how the camper's options or choices, again, defining these choices and helping them through that. And then five, ask them how they're going to achieve those goals and what supports the person needs to make this change. So again, you are there to support them and let them know that you're there to support them. Um, and then make sure you follow up with them. And then six, state clearly what consequences will be if the behavior continues. Seven, ask whether they have questions, and then have them summarize what just happened back to you so that they know, so that you know that they understand. And then eight, again, follow up. So strategies, time for a talk, and then we can definitely send these out to you because I'm just going to go over them pretty briefly because we've definitely touched on all these things. So time for a talk. So this works for all ages. So removal from the activity, and you direct a one-on-one conversation with the camper. And so um, this is when you just sort of go over the behavior that just happened and talk them through it and again what can change. And so younger kids will probably need more direction through the conversation, whereas older kids will probably come up with more ideas, solutions, and choices to try out. Again, here are your active listening skills. So wait until the other person is done speaking, body language, paraphrasing back, asking follow-up questions, asking questions to clarify, balancing time between listening and talking, and framing it more as of a teachable moment. And then ask the experts. So this works for younger ages. Make sure the kids understand that all their behavior is a choice and therefore they are in complete control of their behavior. And so they can always change their choice. They don't necessarily have to act in the bad way that they did. So if they're going to have ongoing problems or repeated behavior, ask them whether or not, when they are not in trouble, what they could do to help them when they are in trouble, and then give them, again, control over solving their problem. Redirection, we already talked about this, so this is when you channel their energy in another focused direction, and that's totally okay. So there's planned ignoring, prompting, proximity, giving choices, and friendly challenges. Um, so prompting is offering a suggestion, starting a game, drawing attention away, or asking about a different behavior. Proximity, so if you're close to your campers, they're less likely to act out because you're right by them and they know that you're watching. Um, for friendly challenges, give kids a reason to do what it is that you're asking and to move them in a direction that you want them to. And then again, you could do a time in or time out or removal from the activity. Just let them sit on the side for a little bit, talk to them about it. Um, the next one would be fixing whatever they did. That's their choice. So again, this could be older kids. So it could be an apology, a cleanup, and then or making it up in some other way. And then there's displacement from the other group, which is sort of like a timeout or removal from the activity just for older kids. Um, and then again, you could, if it's super, super severe, if it's violent, aggressive, or dangerous, or extremely disruptive to a group, the director or the camp advisor should get involved. Um, it should be framed in the fact that by them acting in certain ways, it's taking away from the experiences of other campers, and it's not being fair to the other campers for taking away from their own experience. Um, but then again, the rest of the group should keep continuing on with the rest of their activities, and the camper that is acting out can be taken care of separately. If it's super, super severe involvement of parents or guardians, again, this is after you've reached out to the directors and the camp advisor, and so this will really just depend on what happens and on various situations. And then you could also do a behavior contract where you write down specifically like what type of behavior changes you want to see, and then them signing how they'll change, how they'll do it, etc. It's basically your conversation putting down put down on paper and them signed so that they have a physical, tangible thing to touch and just be like, hey, I promised to do this, so I'm going to do this. And then we went through some scenarios before, but that is basically the end of this training. And if you do have any kind of, or if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, or any specific like scenarios that you would love to go over because you're just like, I'm not sure how to deal with that. And it's happened before, or like I've heard it happen before. Again, do not hesitate to reach out to your co-counselors during your time at camp because they can help you deal with situations as well. And don't forget to take the quiz after this. Cool. Perfect. Love it all. Thank you for watching.